We're out here mudding by dirt road anthems. We're hanging out with Heroes Live tonight. We've got Colonel J.B. Bissell with us, Lieutenant Colonel, active duty. Got a few more months till he retires. We're excited to talk to him tonight. He is a special guest of ours. Please notice our master-rated donors, Williams, Jackman, Calderon, Evans, and Cobos. Thank you so much. Our senior-rated donors are those that have agreed over time to give us money monthly or help us with expertise or experience. Newton, Diaz, Shrum, Fernandez, thank you so much. Thank you so much for all your support. If you'd like to support, you can support at formerforce.com. Last night we talked about TOOTS, training exercise without troops. Tonight we're going to talk about Lieutenant Colonel J.B. Bissell, an active duty member. We're going to try to tell stories that are lasting, a lifetime. What's this about? Realized in 2016 that my buddy Maggot, he couldn't remember what he did yesterday, but he could remember the old days. So I called him up on the phone and recorded it and started Heroes I Know. Did several interviews back then. Sergeant Mason kicked it off again in 2021. He found out he was sick and in the hospice, and he couldn't even talk because of throat cancer. And I thought, why haven't I continued Heroes I Know? And so joined us. Joe designed a coin and a T-shirt, and here we are with Heroes I Know. This is Joe and I, and you know we put this coin and box and thumb drive together. We want to tell your stories before you're too sick to tell them. We're here with Lieutenant Colonel J.B. Bissell tonight on Heroes Live. Hey, sir, thanks for agreeing to hang out with me tonight. I'm really excited. I sure do appreciate it.
Well, hey, thanks for having me. That was a great introduction there, and it was good to see those paratroopers with their rigs on in those pictures. It certainly brought back some memories looking at that.
Oh my gosh! Well, I did a video for you, and we got Lieutenant Colonel Elliott Bissell. He's put his fake name out on the internet, so that's what we're going with, okay? But JB's here with us, and I want to play this for you. You know, if you don't mind, and let's watch.
No, I don't. I'm curious of what you pulled off there.
Yeah, let's check it out, everybody. Here we are with Colonel Bissell. So Good by the Orcas.
With you, the sun is shining 24/7. 'Cause when we're together, it feels like we're in heaven. If it will get dark, you'll be my million stars. I know I can lean on you. Ooh, you catch me like a leaf falling from a tree. If I'll be a shooting star, you make a wish. No, I don't fake this kind of feeling, never felt so real. My heart is on the table 'cause you're my everything. I do, I wanna marry you. 'Cause when you're around, I know it's true. The way you make me feel is so good, baby. So good, so good. Every single day we spend apart, I wanna be with you. Baby, take my hand, hold it tight just like you do. Feels so good, so good. When I wake up in the morning and I see your face, I'm becoming blind by your dazzling grace. What a beautiful feeling to be close to you. There's nothing else I wanna do. Ooh, and from the fields of flowers you chose to pick me. You're spreading sugar on my misery, and I don't fake this kind of feeling, never felt so real. My heart is on the table 'cause you're my everything. I do, I wanna marry you. 'Cause when you're around, I know it's true. The way you make me feel is so good, baby. So good, so good. Every single day we spend apart, I wanna be with 'cause when you're around, I know it's true. The way you make me feel is so good, baby. So good, so good. Every single day was kind of good. I wanna be with you. Baby, take my hand, hold it tight, just like you do. Feels so good, so good.
We're here with Elliott, everybody. JB Bissell, the Colonel, and sir, thank you so much for hanging out with me. It's so exciting. So, what did you think about the little slideshow thing I was able to pull up?
Man, that was amazing, Will. I tell you what, there's a lot of great memories, and I'm looking at them pictures, and that's a great summary. Yeah, that was emotionally moving. I've always tried to fuse the duty with the friends and the family, and man, that just came right through. I really appreciate that. I'll cherish that. That's nice. Yeah.
It was really interesting how I took the information that I saw in front of me and developed a story in my head that I didn't fully know. And it was neat to get a message from you this morning, and let's get things shored up and got things fixed up. I'm here with Colonel J.B. Bissell, everybody, and we're going to tell a story about, where he's from and what he did and what he's good at, and maybe where he could do something better sometimes, and advice he might could give to us. He's going to tell us his favorite song and all those kinds of things. So, where are you from?
Yeah, so thanks for having me. So this all started back in a little place called southeastern Ohio called Meigs County. You can look that up on the internet. That's down there along the river in the Ohio River Valley between West Virginia and Ohio, right down the Kentucky, West Virginia, Ohio tri-state area. Coal mining country is where I'm from. So there's one of those black and white pictures that you had there. It has my hometown back in about the 1910s. A couple of years before I was around, but yeah, that's where I'm from.
I saw that you wrote on Facebook that you like always are going to feel like that's home, or that's where you're connected to. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I think that the Midwest and certainly the breadbasket of the United States is often lost on the East Coast with its glitter and its glam, or the success of places like California, or the beautiful places like the Rocky Mountains out in Colorado. But there's a lot of really good people that come from the Midwest, and I'm very proud to say that's where I'm from, and that's what formed me. I think everybody that pays attention to college or professional football knows who Joe Burrow is now. So Joe Burrow's mom is a principal back in my hometown. So he grew up. Of course, I was gone years, but that kind of work ethic, that kind of drive. I think the people back there that kind of grow up in a kind of a hard scrabble place form something in them that I just identify with, and I go back there frequently and stay in touch with my people back there.
So you're one of those guys that think it's worth being from somewhere.
That's a really good question, and I absolutely think that's true. I think that we can always go, but who we are when we grow up, the family environment, and then the actual geographical and cultural environment of where we grow up really shapes us when we become young people and then get into our 20s and 30s, and that's really kind of who we are. We can change and modify and improve that, or actually detriment it. But I'm a believer that, that's kind of who you are, is where you grew up. And if you're a person that's an international person that maybe grew up in a State Department family or a military brat, that'll form you too. But I do think that, I do identify with that area. My kids are Army brats. We can get into that later, but that's who I am. And I still, I'm still very connected to that place back there.
What, if you were gonna tell somebody about that place and try to capture the spirit of that place, how would you describe it? Is there a short paragraph or a couple sentences you could say that sums it up?
Yeah, I think I would just say blue collar working town. You know, if you would put a song to it, it would be uh, you know, just a small town boy living in a lonely world by you know, was it REO Speedwagon or
I
Journey?
love it.
Yeah, so that would,
Yeah.
yeah, there would be music that goes to that. And of course, there are good people and bad people from all walks of life, but yeah, I think that's kind of how I would sum that up. Yeah,
Oh my gosh, that's so cool to think about, right? That
yeah.
is so cool to think about. What year were you born?
I didn't know, Will, that was going to be part of the questions, and I'd like to recuse myself now. So I was born in 1972 in a small place called Gallipolis, Ohio, right there along the Ohio River. It's about halfway between Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and Cincinnati. There's actually a little town there called Middleport. It's actually the middle course on the Ohio River between those. Yeah, so 1972.
Was there a lot of kids around you? Were you the only child? Did you have a live in a neighborhood, out in the country, on a farm, ride a bicycle?
Yeah, so I grew up. I was the youngest of four children, so I was the only boy in the family. So I got picked on pretty hard by my older sisters, Lisa, Lynn, and Lori. Hopefully, they'll see this at one point in time and realize what a traumatic impact that had on my life.
Yeah, yeah, I could tell. I
Yeah,
could tell.
we actually ended up. We have a brother that came along several years later. My brother Mike. Uh, but yeah, we lived in a real rural area, and we attended actually Christian school, a private school over in West Virginia, and so we were pretty isolated except for during the school year. And so my little town, I think the population was 66 before I joined the Army in 1990, and then it dropped down to 65 there for a few days there. But
Oh,
yeah, so
no.
not a lot of people, lots of cows back then, you know, both beef and dairy, and then lots of cornfields and hay fields. I don't think that the big farms out west in places like Arkansas and Oklahoma had aggregated by then, so it was still kind of a farm community back in the 80s.
Did you go to school in the elementary school down the street, or did you have to get on a bus, or did your mama take you to school? I know your sisters. How old was your oldest sister when you were born?
She seemed really ancient, and I say that for the purpose of hoping she'll see that one day. She was, I think, 7 years older than me.
Okay.
So when I went to kindergarten, I think she was in maybe fifth or sixth grade, and yeah, so we actually we carpooled for the most of my life until I was in ninth grade. We went to go to Christian school, which is about 30 miles away. So my mother would actually take us uh, 30 miles one way and then drive back home and then 30 miles back. So about 120 miles a day, 5 days a week, just to make sure that we were educated in the manner of their faith and my mother and my father's faith. Um, yeah, so my sisters are all, you know, one's 1 year and a half older than me. The other's three, and the other's five, maybe six. Gotta
Oh
be careful.
wow,
I'm
that's
telling my
awesome.
age, so that tells her age too, right?
Oh, that's cute.
Yeah.
That's cute. Yeah, because sometimes the youngest son gets doted on by the older sisters, like their baby dolls or Barbie dolls and stuff. And it's interesting to see how that dynamic plays out. A lot of times, a lot of times they end up really well adjusted and really smart. A lot of times they turn out to be someone that seems to be have everybody taking care of them all the time. So it's just interesting to see you come out so well, obviously.
Well, I don't know. I think that's arguable, right? So I think that perhaps I can take care of myself, but I aspire to have someone take care of me. But I
Amen,
certainly
amen.
wouldn't confuse that the behavior that my sisters exhibited against me as any type of doting. They were pretty
Uh,
rough on me, you know.
oh, really? They were rough
Yeah.
and tumble, huh?
I did enjoy a lot of Barbie dolls and paper dolls. That was a little doll that was you put little clothes on little tabs. I played those a lot, and then I kind of integrated them into the Hot Wheels and GI Joes along the way as well.
Do you remember a favorite Christmas present when you were a kid?
Let's see here. Yeah, I had the Evil Knievel, the one that they're selling on TV now that you crank up. Do you remember that? Right? You crank
I
it up.
had one. I had one.
My maternal grandmother bought me that, and I like that a lot. And then I'm an outdoors guy, so my dad put a basketball hoop up when I was a kid, and we put a strike zone on the door of the barn that it hung on. So basketballs, I'd wear one out every year, and baseballs, fishing rods, pretty much anything, a bike. So anything that probably just replaced a toy that I kind of went through, as opposed to any other than the Evil Knievel one, which kind of come to mind.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Did you have a lot of? I mean, it sounds to me like you had a lot of hobbies as a kid. You were exposed to like all kinds of things, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So we didn't watch a lot of TV. So we actually, for entertainment, we read a lot. So we'd go to the public library, or back in those rural areas. They used to have a thing called a bookmobile, and a book would just, you remember the bookmobile,
Oh
Will? So
yeah.
he would come through and park in the rural areas, and you'd either walk or take your bike there and turn your books in. So I grew up reading a lot of Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew. Really was into that. Encyclopedia Brown. Those are kind of all dated now, but I always hung out the old sign on the shack with my sister Lisa. But unfortunately, in that small rural neighborhood, we very rarely had a customer that would stop down and put the 25 cents on the gas. And we could never find the Bugs Meany character that we wanted to take down really bad, but we was always looking for him.
I love it. Yeah, Encyclopedia Brown was one of my favorites.
That was
Wow,
great.
that's I
Yeah.
mean you're a geekoid on it like me. That's awesome,
Yeah,
man.
it's great.
That's awesome, right? It's interesting to dream that we're going to be successful at something one day and solve the puzzle and get the bad guy, and to watch those books form the plan, like the Hardy Boys mysteries, right? The story was told from such a perspective that you were learning the entire time. You were problem solving. You were going through the steps to get to the end of the book where you went, okay. Looking back on it, we go, oh, it's the same kind of stuff over and over again. You didn't get it? And it's like, now I do. But yeah, those kinds of adventures form great folks, right? Really do. If you're reading books and having adventures in your mind and going outside and throwing a fishing rod and playing baseball and basketball, and boy, that's great, right? One of the things that I find myself in front of the computer all the time. I mean, all the time, especially now that I'm doing what I'm doing now, and I have to think to myself, am I doing the right thing? Maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm not. I'm here with Colonel Bissell, J.B. Bissell, everybody. Thanks for hanging out. We're telling stories about our life. What kind of fish did you like to catch as a kid? What was available to you?
Well, there was only in that little neighborhood there was only a my mom grew up in Columbus, Ohio, so she was always apprehensive about getting us too far away from the house. So the only thing that I could actually go fish is a neighbor had a pond. Kelly Spencer and her father and her brother Keith and their mother. That we would go. I would go over there, and there was largemouth bass. There was no catfish, and there was bluegill or sunfish that they call them down south. So most of the time it was that, and occasionally my dad would take me down to the Ohio River, and we'd fish for catfish. And it was notorious in Ohio River for large catfish. I don't think we ever caught anything above 3 or 4 pounds, but just the excitement of that, that creature on the other end pulling, and there for a minute you were not sure if what it was, and it's just fun to pass that generation down to my son later, and even now, at half a century old, when I feel that tug, just for that second, it's still exciting. Did you set the hook? Did you miss him? Did you get him? What is it?
Oh yeah. Tell me about those adventures with your dad. Is that something that happened a lot, or is it? Obviously enjoyed things like that, right?
I did. My dad's a construction worker, so he owned his own business. He built houses and residential construction, remodeling, things like that. Self-taught man, brought himself up by the bootstraps. He actually was born in 1946 and suffered from polio during that epidemic back there, and almost didn't make it. So he, you know, he had his own business, so he didn't have a lot of time, disposable time to spend with myself or my sisters. But he probably did spend more time with myself than he did my sisters. But yeah, he did he went fishing with us when I was older. He would go once a year up to Canada and fish. You catch some northern pike and walleye up there, which was absolutely amazing. So I did that a few times before coming into the Army. And then once I got in the Army, I think we've only was able to go back up one time. But yeah, no, he just different era, busy with his work and taking care of the family and putting food on the table and clothes on our backs. I think is the way he used to describe it. Yeah.
I got a feeling you might describe your mother as a godly woman or a praying woman.
Yeah, she certainly is. Yeah. I think that there's been many things in my life that probably her prayers has, and along with my grandmother and my father, probably by the grace of God, maybe I wouldn't be here. Not only just things that we traditionally think about in combat, but just a quick story. I was the old M35 A2 Charlie Deuce and a half. So I'm sure you remember that. I see that smile on your face. But I was a mechanic when I first came in the Army, and you're 19, you go to advanced individual training, and you're out in the unit. And I was in a very small bay with two deuce and a halves beside each other, and I was walking in between them, and there was another soldier in the one on my left, and he had started up, and for whatever reason I moved, and his boot had slipped off the clutch, and he smashed the deuce and a half in front of him, and I had just left there maybe a couple seconds before, and for whatever reason, as I look back on my life, occasionally, because you think you do that when you get a little older, I don't know what spared me from being killed that day, but I certainly thank the good Lord, and I thank my mom's prayers, that, and maybe a little bit of luck in there.
Amen. Amen. Right. They say there's no atheist in foxholes. What? Tell me a little bit about your spirituality. You shared a little bit about it just then, but what is it that keeps you going in the long dark nights when you got to make it to the objective, and there's something that seems to carry you during those dark hours. Is there something that you could talk about?
Well, sure, I don't mind talking about. So I am a believer in the Protestant and Christian faith in Jesus Christ. I'm also a guy that grew up in a real kind of stringent Christian home, and so I never really cared for hypocrisy. So I can't sit out here and profess a faith that a lot of my people know I don't probably live day to day. So I do try to do the right thing. My motto in my life, I think, and I've certainly tried to live this since I was a kid, is do unto others as you would have them do unto you. I call it the golden rule. And, now that I'm the old colonel and I put out my policies, it's right in my policies. I expect everybody here to follow the golden rule and try to, extrapolate that beyond myself. But certainly no one wants to do that if you're not doing it as well. And certainly I have a litany of things I've screwed up over my life. But I do believe that spirituality, for whatever that is, and I have a friend of mine who's a recent immigrant into the United States and the state of California, who's a Muslim, so that we Abrahamic faith we certainly don't be. But I've watched him over since he personally saved my own life potentially a few times in Iraq as my translator, and I've watched him watch his faith and how that's a component of the fabric of his being. And so I do believe that spirituality is something that's important to all of us. It's a component of who we are. Yeah.
Amen. 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 It's obvious that, your grandmother and your mother's and your father's prayers, are working. So yay. I'm glad that you're here with us, and I sure do appreciate it. Tell me about, graduating high school and, going off to the next thing. Was it the Army right after high school? That was the next step, or was there a break? Or tell me about that.
Yeah, well, so I had I don't remember this, but my mom told me when I was 5 years old, I told her I would be a soldier. I saw a soldier with maroon beret on when we were down in North Carolina. I'm sure he's a brag boy. I don't actually recall that. I remember when I was 14, I have an older cousin, Jeff, who's actually my older sister's age, and he had went in the Army. I think I was in ninth grade. And he came home from Fort Leonard Wood, which, I didn't understand any of that then, but he was an engineer, and he had this, kind of a tough, bravado on him, a combat engineer, and he had his girlfriend on his arm who I thought she was pretty, and I thought, well, what, that's what the heck I'm going to do, and I think maybe one of the reasons and I'm just thinking about this when I'm talking to you, Will, is I'm so connected to where I'm from, and I think this is a kind of a common issue with people from small. You kind of want to get out and do something. You kind of want to, spread your proverbial wings beyond the farmland where you grow up or the rural communities. And so I wanted to get out there, and I was pretty adamant that I didn't want to go to college, and so I had a great recruiter that started looking at me when I was in 10th grade, and I talked to him. So he knew he had me on the hook from 10th grade all the way till I graduated. I was easy money for Sergeant First Class Stubbs. I'm getting ready to retire, and I'm going through everything and found his name on my initial enlistment contract. But yeah, so I graduated in, I think, June of 1990. I worked at McDonald's for a couple months in the Ohio University area in Athens, Ohio. And then I left on my first airplane ride for basic training in 5th of September 1990. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's like right Right about Desert Storm kicking off about that time.
Yeah, so I think Saddam invaded Kuwait on the 2nd of August. And so for me going through, I wanted to be an airborne ranger, but you make these choices in life, and I wasn't sure I would like the Army, so I decided I would try to pick up a skill set. So I enlisted because my recruiter, and they would never lie, said you can always re-enlist for whatever you want later. So I decided I would try to learn a skill set as a mechanic because I had a bit of interest in being a mechanic. And so I enlisted as a 63 Bravo, and I thought if I like this, I'll change into the 11 Bravo and go to Ranger School and go to Jump School. But so Saddam Hussein, I think, Iraq invaded Kuwait on the 2nd of August, sometime in that time frame. And then the 82nd got on airplanes, and George Bush famously said, "This will not stand." And so when I went to boot camp and then AIT, I went to Fort Dix, New Jersey, and I was what you called a Dix to Dix. So you go to boot camp and then AIT, and our Christmas exodus, as they call it, I think the young soldiers still call it that in the TRADOC units, was canceled, and I went straight through until we went off to for what ended up being the Fort Jackson, South Carolina funnel to get our chocolate chip uniforms and get on an airplane and take off to our next rendezvous with destiny, right?
Oh, so you exited training and flew off to meet your new unit that has already deployed?
So that's a fascinating question. There was no unit. It was a replacement funnel based on what they thought would be casualties, which was kind of a hard thing to understand as when you're a 19-year-old kid. I'd turned 19 during that time frame. And we went to King Khalid's military city, and I hope you're smiling there because you know that, right, Will? And I remember just standing around. There was kids in there from with their maroon berets, and everybody was talking about jumping, and I'm like, man, I'm just a leg over here. I don't, And I ended up in Army Central Command G3, and I was a driver for who would eventually become Major General Ernst, who then became so I was his driver as a private. He was a colonel. And I actually moved the icons on the huge map. Master Sergeant Rigo was my NCOIC. I think he ended up retiring out of one of the regiment battalions. But we was all in Army Central Command G3. Long story short, I only did I think maybe 3 months there. And then I PCS back to the States. And instead of going back with your unit, I went back to Fort Dix. I have a bit of a story. Maybe we'll tell that later about how we went through Benning because we came back with 197th Infantry Brigade, and I had nobody there for me. So a bunch of Sergeant Airbornes grabbed me. I'm like, where's your unit? I'm like, I don't have a unit. Long story short, we went back to Fort Dix. And so I had a combat patch, but I had no patch on my left sleeve because I really didn't have a unit. And then I ended up getting orders for Fort Polk, Louisiana, out of Fort Dix again. Yeah.
So you deployed to war.
Yeah.
Operate in war, and then still don't have a unit?
So I didn't have a unit. I was still like an AIT, an initial entry training soldier, because I was only temporarily assigned to. Now that I'm retired, I'm like digging through all these old orders and stuff and looking at this and like looking at it from an 05's perspective instead of a 19-year-old E2, right?
So you were just sitting in a warehouse waiting for somebody to die, and they were going to be like, Bissell, over here, and hand you orders, and off you were going to go?
It was actually a big white tent is what it was. Saw Scud missiles getting hit by Patriots there, right? And it was a pretty so I was there the night the Daharan warehouse was hit, I think, and we saw that there was several Scuds that night that hit. So then we put gas and put our M17 Pro mask on. They had their atropine injectors. Just went through all this training drill, Sergeant. I know how to do it.
Wow.
But yeah, pretty interesting. Good memory, or maybe not a good memory, but certainly a vivid memory. Now that you kind of tugged it out of me, there, Will.
So one of the interesting things about that, right, is you got to think about who was the cadre that were watching over you folks, right? I mean, y'all probably had a couple transition students or something that had some rank, but I mean, they had to ship a whole group of folks over to manage a bunch of privates with nothing to do, right?
Yeah. I honestly, it's interesting you say. I remember my basic training drill sergeant, and I remember my AIT drill sergeant. But I don't really remember those few days that we set in KKMC King Khalid Military City until I went off to the Army Central Command. Now, I certainly remember once I got there, I had Staff Sergeant Arnone and Staff Sergeant Palmer and Colonel Ernst and Master Sergeant Rigo. I remember those guys well because from my perspective, I didn't always stand at parade rest every time they looked at me. I mean, I was making coffee, I was burning classified documents, I was burning excrement and urine in the latrine duty. So it was a different feel, and this is my first real unit, so it's just a different thing.
Well, hey, look, there's nobody better as a colonel's driver than a smart mechanic, right? That's pretty cool. So good,
Yeah.
good, good for that. And if you can operate the radios and move the pins, it's obvious that you did well there. So, wow, what a and I think I know Rigo, by the way. I think I know Master Sergeant Rigo. I think I do. I think I went to Kosovo with him, I think.
Yeah, wouldn't doubt it. Yeah. Typical airborne ranger, man. Just, all bat boy his whole life. Those guys are posed down the 82nd. Don't want to hear that crap,
Oh yeah. Exactly. I think it's the same guy. So, you go to Fort Polk, Louisiana. Yay! Woo!
Really excited about that. Remember, just small town boy. I'm not really sure Louisiana is on the map. So went down to Fort Polk, Louisiana. I think he flew into not Barksdale Air Force Base, but whatever the name, Alexandria, and then there's a van that drives you out across the swamps and bayous for about. I went back in 2005 for the Joint Readiness Training Center when I was in the 101st. And I went over to my old barracks and looked around. It was kind of neat. It was a little bit of it's kind of a walk down memory lane, but yeah. So Fort Polk, Louisiana, and I was assigned to what was called the Devil Troop Brigade, and it's kind of the support brigade. COSCOM kind of 5th Infantry. This is when 5th Infantry Division with the Black Diamond was still there. You remember that, right? So, yeah, it was 5th Infantry Division. So I was there about 2 weeks. We got orders to go back to Desert Storm for Operation Provide Comfort, right? So,
no!
Right back over across the pond we go. Yeah.
Did you go to? Were you going to tell me you went to jump school when they realized you had a combat patch and no unit patch?
No, so no, I went to jump school as a staff sergeant, so I was a leg for quite a while. Just when I got back to Fort Benning, and we were supposed to go back up to, I think, Atlanta, and then I was going to get a ticket to go to Fort Dix. And this was all, crazy stuff for a 19-year-old kid from southeastern Ohio. I didn't know how to move around. I was waiting for some drill sergeant to put me in formation and give me a right face, but we went. Let's see. We landed at with $1.97. I think they called them back then. 197 Infantry Brigade, third Infantry, Rock of the Marne. The brigade's still there. I think it's still 3rd Brigade over there. But they're all in a formation, getting awards, and all the families are there. And I was just standing there by the fence watching it, but I didn't realize there was some black hats over there. Like, come here, troop. Where are you from? Where's your family? Get in formation. I'm like, I don't have a family. I'm going. No, so this is a good story. They actually took me into Sergeant Airborne's office and started dumping beer down my throat, man. And I was about a $1.60 back then, and I hadn't drank. I mean, I was a kid, right? So I drank a little bit in high school, but after being over in the desert, I was pretty inebriated after about 4 beers.
Right.
And one of my staff sergeants that worked for Sergeant Rigo, I almost missed the bird. So he, to leave the van to go to Atlanta. So he comes and gets me, and he's like, "What in the H are you doing, Bissell?" I got a picture of him somewhere, but he grabbed me, and then the Sergeant Airborne's like, "Come here, Golf," because he was a ranger without the jump wings, right? So they started dumping beer in him, and he's like, "I got a van, man." He's like, he was mad at me that he realized what happened. So we got in the van and went to Atlanta, and I was inebriated. And we get to Fort McPherson probably at 2:00 in the morning, and I'm sitting by the door of the van, and the door of the van opens, and I'm still a little bit inebriated, and I jump out, and there's a 2-star general welcome us home, and I'm about to fall over. Will, I thought he got up in the middle of the night to welcome home these Fort McPherson guys, not knowing that there's a few of us attached or whatever, but. Yeah, pretty funny that, I thought, oh my God, there's a general. You don't see general except for in a picture back then.
Oh yeah, right. It's interesting to think about being starstruck by running in. I remember the first time I ever saw a colonel in real life and the rank on his hat and stuff, and I was like, I didn't even know what to do. It was confusing to me. I wasn't ready for it, right? It was like I was in the wild and I had to salute somebody all by myself. I'm like, wow!
Yeah, we've all been down that road. Absolutely.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. That's so funny. Oh my gosh. So, Fort Polk, Louisiana,
Yeah.
63 Bravo, first
Yeah.
unit. Actually, but you had so much experience driving the Colonel and being
Yeah.
in a talk, right? Anytime you're
Yeah.
around a talk, you're around all the gossip, all the good, all the bad. You hear it all, right? You just gotta just keep driving, right?
Hey, you see the humanity in people, right? So you take that shine off that eagle you were just talking about. So you're like, oh, he's a guy too, but you're still a little scared of him, right? Especially with Sarnrigo around. You don't want to be comfortable with the old man, right? Because Sarnrigo's going to tighten you up.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
oh yeah. So what was it like going into a regular unit and going into a motor pool or what? I assume maybe that's where you went. I don't know.
Yeah. So I was in a motor pool, the organizational mechanic. Back then we had 4 echelons of maintenance. I was in a heavy equipment maintenance company. They actually rebuilt transmissions and engines on the old 151s and then the Cuck V's, which have been their way. And then we've got a couple Humvees in there right at the end. And I wanted to be down there with the forward support battalions, but you just kind of end up where you are when you're a private. You don't understand this. And when I got to the Fort Bragg years later and Sergeant Major Cuffey, which I'm sure you know Sergeant Major Cuffey, I went to the jungle school with him, and I'll tell you that story here in a little bit. But I went to try to get me a job. But when you're a private, you don't know about trying to get you a job. You just take the orders and go where the sergeant tells you to go. And so I did well there. I had a platoon sergeant named Melvin Spence, who actually became a pretty inspirational guy to me, which I realized in retrospect he was hard on me. And I actually asked him to come to my command when I took command when I was a captain. I had my second command in the D.C. area, and he came down and sat on the front row as one of my guests. And I thought he was real hard on me back then because he always made me shine my boots really, really. And I had an issue, and went to my squad leader, so we approached him together, and why are you picking on me type of thing. And then he said, well, you'll be something, Bissell. These other guys, I don't pick on them because they're not going to be anything. If he's out there listening to me, Sergeant Spence, you've been a big inspiration in my life. But yeah, my cousin had told me that the 12 Bravo guy that was before me had told me to do these correspondent courses when I get to my first unit. So you're laughing, right? Because we all did that, right? So I just found a bunch of my old correspondence. I've got every LES and the green one, white ones, and all that stuff. I was just finding all that stuff this last weekend. But I did a lot of correspondent courses to get my promotion points up because I wanted to get promoted, and I wanted to be a drill sergeant, right? Because I think we all want that when we're young men, young ladies, that when we first come in, you see that power and that kind of authoritarian way of leadership by example, and everything they do is just so straight. So at your first unit, that's one of the things I really ran into is I saw some NCOs that and some officers that I wasn't really impressed with. I'm in probably almost a year at this point. Like, well, these guys aren't that squared away, and then I realized, if I apply myself, I can have a bigger piece of the pie. And I think, back then we ironed our uniforms and shined our boots every night and had open ranks inspections every week, usually every day. And my buddies who I drank a lot of beer with at Fort Polk, because there's not a lot to do down there besides fish and drink beer, and hit all of the bars out there on near Leesville. But they would say, we can't go out because Bissell's in there shining his damn boots, old cheeseball, But trying to be soldier of the month and get to go to the board and all that. So yeah. I drank a lot of beer and chased some individuals of the opposite sex and maybe sowed some wild oats. It's probably not appropriate for this particular conversation, but certainly had a great time. Met some really good friends that I'm still in touch with. 30 years later, Joey McCoy and Raymond. Raymond was one of my first squad of squirrels when I was at E4, and they gave me a squad. Dave Raymond. So yeah, I mean, just all these names are coming back in my mind, but yeah. Had a really good time and, re-enlisted so I could be that 11 Bravo. But, the Cold War ended, and so the Army drew down. And so you're going to stay in your MOS or you're getting out, Joe. So I decided to stay.
Oh wow! So 63 Bravo re-enlisted. By this time, you're a sergeant. You got
Yeah.
to be. Yeah. Tell me about becoming a sergeant. What that was like.
So it's funny. Went to the board, and when I was doing the promotion point worksheet, there was a piece on there for civilian credits, and I'm like, well, what is that? And what's going on, Redmond? So they said, well, that's your college, and I think I told you, Will, I didn't want to go to college. It's so interesting now, 32 years into this, I've got 3 master's degrees, a bachelor, and 2 associates. But I did that was never in the plan, man. That's the Army's plan. And so when I reenlisted, and I reenlisted and got overseas assignment to Panama, and I knew when I got on that plane, actually the van to go down to Alexandria to get on the plane to go to Panama, that I'm going to go to Panama, and I want to be all I can be. So all that drinking stuff, I'm putting that on hold, maybe one night a week. But I'm going to go to airborne school if I can get there, and I'm going to go to air assault school. I'm going to go do because 5th Infantry Division, it's hard to get those because mech infantry, so it's hard to get those things right. All the 4187s you want to put in DA form 4187, they wouldn't make it out of the order, and no one's got money for that, especially after the Soviet Union fell apart. So went to Panama in '93, and started going to college as soon as I got down there. To get those civilian credit hours up, I was all right with weapons and PT and all this. My military education was already maxed out, but I wanted to be a sergeant. So yeah, I made sergeant in '94. So I think about 3 years and 9 months into it, I made sergeant, and I was in an aviation. So I was in the 228th Aviation down there, Will. And my battalion commander was Wild Dick Bowman. So everybody knows Mike Stucker's down there in 160th, and he was actually shot in a hostage rescue flying a little bird with 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment when he was a major. He was my battalion commander. I didn't understand any of that till I saw him in the shower and I saw all the scars on him one day, and I asked, who is that guy? This is before internet. We didn't know. I knew he was a little crazy, but, all colonels were a little crazy, and the sergeant majors. So, yeah, I made sergeant. I went from E4 to eventually E6 in the same platoon, and that's always rough. You're mowing grass one day, then you're the squad leader, and then a year later, you're telling the squad leaders. And I found out it's good that the Army PCSs people because, without mentioning names, there were some guys that was like, you weren't like that. I'm like, well, man, that guy, he loved me because I was always on his grass cutting detail. And now that I'm telling him I need detail, he's kind of pushing back on me. Anyway, I digress, but Colonel Bowman, I would end up being his operations NCO for the HHC, a guy named Captain Flewitt and Lee Medley. And then I started understanding for the first time what senior NCOs and officers do because I was in the HHC, right? To me, there was just a bunch of lazy people because drill sergeants kind of perpetuate that myth, right? But I watched my commander, Lee Medley, and I won't talk about his first sergeant, but I was kind of like the de facto first sergeant. This is one of those old guys that was on the way out and drank a lot and didn't come to work much. So until the old man pushed him out, we still had to get stuff done. So I'd go back and forth to the S3 sergeant major to kind of run the company. And I think that's probably the first time I started thinking about being an officer because I saw, all NCOs aren't equal either, right? So there's some guys who never got their 6-week training schedules in on time, I was a training NCO, and I was a squad leader and a motor sergeant on that unit and a platoon sergeant at the same time. So, yeah, I was really into the backbone of the Army. I think that first couple months I was a squad leader. I think I had that same power trip that a lot of us go through, every boot will be shined. And I see them guys even today in the Army, and I smile because I'm the old, colonel in the back of the formation sometimes now. But that's what keeps our Army running. I actually published a couple articles about the NCO dimension, how I'm a foreign area officer now. I can see other armies professionally. And it really is, in my argument in these papers that I publish, is that's what separates the capacity of our Army, not so much the technology and the GPSs and the freaking laser-guided bombs. It's the ability for an officer to extend his reach and scope by empowering his non-commissioned officers. Anyway, I'm kind of getting off philosophical on you, but Will, but
No, I love it. No, that's exactly what's neat to hear, right? It's a specialty of yours, and you're interested in that, and that's really cool. Thanks for sharing. I really appreciate it. I know that eventually you became a warrant officer. And,
yeah.
so it's interesting to see somebody that's, But the only thing you're going to tell me next is you're going to go to Space Command, and before that you joined the Marine Corps. But yeah, so how did you end up becoming a warrant officer?
It's interesting. So I told you I had that aspiration to be a drill sergeant, so I was still pushing for that. And then back then, this is the mid '90s. I believe you were around in the mid '90s with me, right? You were in a different place. We were in the same army. I made staff sergeant in December of 1996. There were two of us that made it, so I had, I think, 791. I was very proud of that, and I still am, man. Anyway, I wanted to be a drill sergeant, so I put a packet in, and if you remember right, that was the same time frame that the Aberdeen Proving Grounds drill sergeants were doing some very unethical things, and actually sexual assault and harassment with young female soldiers up in Aberdeen. And I think, and this is just that they looked at me, and I saw a 24-year-old staff sergeant with very little experience, so they turned me down. And I, back then, drill sergeant, recruiting reserves and ROTC, right? You needed something to get to crack through that E7. So I'm looking at E7, and then they don't want to send me to drill sergeant school, and I don't want to be in a motor pool all my life. Or I wanted to do something, So I'd been to going to college, and I was finishing up my associate's degree for Central Texas College. Probably a lot of people that have watched this, they know that. We all went down that. A lot of us went down that CTC road. But I said, well, I'll think about OCS and warrant officer school because I had a different perspective on officers now, and I thought I can have a bigger piece of the pie, and I don't have to be a bootlicker or whatever that when we're enlisted young guys we think that officers all are. I can make an impactful difference, and so I actually put a packet in for warrant officer school. I think in '96. Of course, it went off in the mail. This is before email, and I PCS'd to Fort Bragg and got airborne school finally. So 7 years later, I ended up going back, found those same NCOs. A couple of them are still around there because it seems like the guys over there in airborne school stay there, and asked them if I had the same jump wings those guys gave me when I was a private. Went to airborne school as an E6. I can't confirm or deny if I got my blood wings because I think that would be politically incorrect in today's day, but I would tell you that I wanted those wings. I'd wanted them since I was a kid. And then I went to Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Now, when I was with Colonel Bowman down in the 228th Aviation Battalion, he liked me, and he wanted me to go to the 160th or to the Ranger Regiment because he saw what I was doing down there as his HHC NCO with the operations NCO. But he also sent me to he had a West Point buddy of his that was commanding the 2nd 504 at the time, and I can't remember the colonel's name, but the sergeant major was Sergeant Major Cuffey. And so I went through the jungle operations training school with 2nd 504, and I was actually in Sergeant Major's platoon. I'm sure you probably know who Sergeant Major is, right? Small world, right? And Sergeant Major broke his leg on that cycle, and my weapons squad leader got moved up to platoon sergeant, so I ended up getting a fire team as a mechanic E5, and I wanted to go back to Bragg. And I actually, Colonel Bowman also sent me to SEER school. I was the only mechanic in my class. There were some boys from LURS D there. So when I moved to Fort Bragg after airborne school in '96, I tried to go to LURS D. I found out those guys had been moved to HHC of Corps. So I went over to Sergeant Major Cuffey, and Sergeant Major Cuffey was 160% strength on 63 Bravo 30s. But he did send me down to 20th Engineer Brigade, so I wouldn't have to. I wanted to jump, so I ended up in the Tiger Battalion at 20th Engineer Brigade, 27th Engineer Battalion, and that was my airborne time.
So that's a storied unit down there, right?
It is.
Wow.
That's a great unit. That's the only rough terrain jumpers in the entire world. And that was in Bravo Company, but we worked on their chainsaws over there. Some really good guys, right? Unfortunately, so I got there, and I wanted a platoon sergeant job, and I wanted a motor sergeant job, and I got it. I had the interview, and I got it. And about 8 months later, I got a letter from the S1 that I got selected for warrant officer school. And we won't say his name. My battalion sergeant major was not happy about that at all. Thought you were going to make E7 there, buddy. We don't want you. You get out of here. We need good NCOs, not officers.
Isn't it interesting how some NCOs handled those that went warrant officer or went and got a commission? I noticed that there were some people that that weren't really joking that much when they were saying, "Ah, you're betraying the this or that." You know, there were some folks that meant it in a way, and that was interesting.
I have a whole book of stories on that, and I won't tell you. I would just tell you that honestly, it's a small majority of the NCOs felt like I wasn't. You know, these are guys I knew for years. It's okay. It made me a stronger person, but it kind of hurt, man. I'm still me. Yeah, that's you know, I being on the other side of that equation that you witnessed. Yeah, I'm, you know, God bless the Corps, man. I was, you know, I wanted to be, you know, I was all about Audie Murphy and all, but yeah, and that's all good. And you know what? And sometimes, especially as I reflect when I'm older, maybe that's not a bad thing. It makes officers a little better. Makes them realize that, you know, there is a separation there. But there was a couple, you know, a few years there that even when I went to second lieutenant, I went through it again, but I was ready for it this time, you know. But yeah, you know, I'm very proud. You know, under my lapel, I still keep my E6 and my W2 bars under there so I can flash them around. But it is what it is. Everybody's got a personality, and if someone had a problem with me, I eventually got where I didn't have to try to explain myself. Well, I don't really care. I'll just keep moving on. It's all right.
Yeah. Amen. What was becoming a warrant like? Were you a motors warrant?
Yeah, I was a 915 battalion maintenance tech. So went from so warrant officer candidate school was a lot of fun. Pretty tough. It's challenging school. I'd been to SEER school. I've been to jungle school. I've been to, you know, some tactical schools, but getting in there and rolling T-shirts and underwear and just the, you know, for lack of better terminology, just the games, you know, and the integrity and duty, honor, country, and we need some good NCOs. We'll kick you out. And then a lot of guys, you know, these, you know, good old E7. I've seen plenty of them in there and OCS. I'm not taking this anymore. So, you know, then I realized they got to deal with that because none of us, especially the Type A guys, you don't want to fail, right? So, man, don't do that because you're going to hate that the rest of your life. But yeah, it was tough, challenging. Went through that in '97, and then you know, I was 25 years old, so born in '72, and went to MLRS battalion in Fort Sill, Oklahoma. And I'm not going to mention his name, but I actually have a good affinity for him. But my battalion commander, you know, I still thought, I wasn't sure that, you know, officers, what all they did. So I actually thought I would have a little bit of the coffee and donuts, you know, and talk to, you know, people and call them by their first name, Will, and golf and things. And it ended up being the toughest 5 years of my life, man. That, you know, I actually I sat down and cried about a year into it and said, man, I've made a mistake. I could have made E7. But what I found out there, and it's ironic, it ended up helping him as a foreign area officer many years later. But as the warrant officer in a MLRS battalion at Fort Sill, which is not, you know, a division unit. At the time, General Shinseki was the chief of staff of the Army. He filled all the divisions to 100%, and all of us that weren't in divisions. So I ended up doing a captain's job, an EH job, and a W3 job as a W1. And what I found out that first day with my boss was my battalion commander. He said he asked me how old I was, and he threw his hat and he cussed because he said, why in the world they send me a kid? And I remember this so vividly. It shook me up really bad. A lieutenant colonel was a big deal to me back then, you know. But he said there's 5 people that'll make or break this battalion. Myself, the sergeant major, the S3, and the XO, and you. I don't care about the battery commanders. I don't care about the first sergeants. And I'm like, okay, whatever that means. And about 2 weeks later, when one of the batteries couldn't make it out of the motor pool with 9 launchers, they only got 3 out and 6 were broke down. I was like, man, those guys are jacked up. And I saw the battalion commander, and he was pissed. But he came over to me, Will. He didn't go down. He said, you're going to fix this. So I learned a lot about, and I learned it really hard. I ended up probably working 70-hour weeks for 5 years. I learned that you're responsible and you don't have the authority. And getting things done when you're responsible with no authority is incredibly difficult, but you can do it through influence. And that's, you modulate that behavior. You can be a jerk. There's bees, there's honey, there's freaking anger. So a lot of people called me the angry chief. Remember the movie Falling Down when that guy's mad? They would put pictures of me up. You know, JB was always, and Chief was always mad. But that was something I had to portray to move the readiness of the unit. And just kind of keep going on that. So we ended up 3 years later, we won the second place in the entire world for the best maintained unit in the world, the Army Award for Maintenance Excellence, and then we won the whole thing the year I went to OCS. So, and by that time we was getting into the arms room and fixing the first arms lawnmowers, with doing preventive maintenance and plugs and air filters and weed eaters, and people like Chief's got his hands everywhere. So it was time to me leave that unit too. But yeah, that was tough 5 years, man. I always thought that warrant officers would sit around with their feet up, drank coffee, and grew big mustaches and complain, and it didn't quite work out like that for me.
You missed the memo. They didn't teach you something properly in the school or something. Something happened. You were absent the day they showed you how to do it, I guess.
It depends on the MOSs, man. I'll stay out of that topic. I'm gonna make some people angry if I say that. But yeah, just I think it don't. There's people that are enlisted. There's people that are officers. And there's people that are warrant officers. That if you're in a certain job, it could be an M2 NCOIC on a range. If someone gets hurt, that bubble's on you, and in that particular unit, if we couldn't shoot, move, and communicate, it was Chief Bissell's fault.
Oh, yeah.
Or at least I felt like it was, yeah.
Well, the colonel said it was. The boss man said it was. He laid that down to you day one. You knew it. You were like, whoop, pucker factor.
When he changed command a year and a half, 2 years later, he pulled me aside, and it was good. And I have he made me a good man, and I appreciate him holding my feet to the fire. I was a young punk staff sergeant wearing W1 bars, and he made me grow up a little bit.
Wow.
It's good. Yeah.
So isn't it interesting how wise you think your leaders are until all of a sudden you find yourself wearing the same rank they wore, and you're looking around going, I'm not as smart as that guy, I don't think,
We all go through that, right? Or you question what they're doing, and then you end up doing the exact same thing and going, man, I didn't so they call it emotional intelligence now, right? But back then it was just like, maybe I shouldn't pass judgment so fast, because I've already freaking burned a couple times when I thought the guy did something wrong. In reality, I probably would have done the same doggone thing if I looked at both sides of the coin. I think that humanity in general is kind of myopic and self-centered, and we kind of think about ourselves, and we don't understand empathetically, especially what our leaders are going through, or sometimes even what our subordinates are going through, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, all right, so you did 5 years. So hold on, so you've already done like 11 years already? Is this right?
Yeah. So I showed up to OCS as a fresh, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed 29-year-old second lieutenant candidate, right?
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And that's where I ran into Phil Weaver. So Phil Weaver just coming out of Delta Force at the time, and him and I, you strip everything off so no one knows who you are, but it starts shaking out after about 2 weeks. Who can put someone into an extended rectangular formation? Who can take someone screaming at you, be it an officer or an NCO, because you get both of them in OCS, and under that pressure still dress, a 150-man company with canteens grounded in time in 7 minutes for the flag to go up? Who can do a right face and move them out and get them through the chow hall in about 18 minutes? And those guys just kind of, people like Troy Thomas. I don't know if you know Troy from the Ranger Regiment as well, but Troy was our classmate. I mean, we have quite a few of them in there.
Yeah, I met Phil in a church Sunday school class, and we hit it off and really formed a great bond. And during that time, I was a jump master instructor when I knew Phil, and it was just great times. He was a great, wonderful guy. Is a great, wonderful guy, and I miss seeing him this weekend. I was hoping to get to see him, but we weren't able to get together when I was up there in Fayetteville. Tell me about OCS. I mean, you shared a little bit about what made you decide to go to OCS. How'd that come around? It's like, let me just try that for a while.
Yeah, that's a great question, and thanks for asking it. So, when I was actually in Warrant Officer Candidate School, I got in a little bit of I had my integrity question. I had to repeat a phase. So I was, I didn't ever want to go through something like that again. And, but while I was there, I think it was the week we graduated, you kind of hear about the benefit. There was a class called the Benefits of the Army, for whatever it means. CW4 retired Flanor gave the brief. No idea why I remember that. But there was I think a Harvard graphics. I don't think we were at PowerPoint yet. That he threw up, right? You remember all these multi-made? This is a great conversation because you're making me remember all those the Zenith 286s. But he threw this slide up that was basically like 99% of them will make W-2. Of those W-2s, I think 70% would make W-3. This is 97. So this is him looking at the Army then. This is before the Pitchfork Creek, Army After Next, and all the other stuff came. Transformation. This is way before trans. And then he's like, out of those 75% of the 99% that make W3, only about 50% will make W4. And I just started running the numbers, sitting there with a scratch piece of paper, and I thought, my God, if I don't make W4, I'm going to get riffed out of the Army at about 16 years because I was a young warrant officer candidate. Now, this happened to the Air Defense Artillery Warrant Officer Corps much more frequently than anybody wants to. I hope this is one of them little layers that you learn something else again. Really interesting. So I actually started thinking about officer candidate school at warrant officer school just for the survivability. I thought, I am a staff sergeant. I would never have to get promoted again. But now I'm going to go through as a W1, and if I don't make, which is less than a 50% cut, which I think I can do, but you're one bad mouthing a freaking major away from getting that, right? So everything matters on an OER for an officer. So I thought about it, and then after 4 years, I guess, of all that work in that motor pool, I would watch my lieutenants leave the motor pool about 1400. Go play softball, and I'm like, man, I was working late when I was the NCO. Now I'm working late as a warrant officer. Why can't? And then I thought, man, I kind of want to guide on again. I want to do something than just run motor pool. Talked to my branch manager and said, man, JB, or chief, my warrant officer branch manager said, you just won, Army Award for Maintenance Excellence. I'm going to put you straight in the tank battalion. You're ready. I didn't want to go to the tank battalion.
Let's turn the heat up. Let's turn the heat up.
Well, yeah, I'm just going to freaking. I'm going to spend the rest of my life with hydraulic resistant fluid and WD. What's the 70-90 weight in the axles? I don't want that. I want to command. I want to be around soldiers. I want to have fun again. And so I put my packet in, and my brigade commander was like, Chief, are you sure you want to be a lieutenant? And he brought me in. You're going to have to tighten up your little rough edges here a little bit, buddy. But they endorsed me. My post commander, 2-star, endorsed me, and I went down to OCS in 11. I was actually on the obstacle course with Phil Weaver on September 11th of 2001 when a guy named Al Prizer was our company commander. And at lunch, he pulled us around and gave us MREs. We had 144 candidates in that class. We ended up with 102 of us graduating. But about 70% were these college ops, which are kids that just basically come in with a bachelor's degree, go to boot camp. So it was really incumbent upon the rest of us to kind of, really help them through OCS. And again, it was another one of them challenge, like, what am I doing here, man?
So did you enjoy putting second lieutenant bars on? Was that an exciting experience, or was that I don't know what I would feel like, honestly, at some level to put second lieutenant bars. I don't want to take anything away from a second lieutenant. I don't get it, but you know what I'm talking about. At some point, you're like, hold on just a second. I got a little experience here. I'm not,
I went another way with it, Will, and thanks for recognizing that. So the moment I became a second lieutenant, look behind me. You see that flag up there, and there's a sword up there, a saber?
Yeah.
I actually was a distinguished honor graduate. I beat Phil out by minuscule points to be the DHG. He was my XO when we graduated. Yeah. And I got that when I walked across the stage, and I thought, I've been a lieutenant for 2 seconds. I got the nicest award I've ever gotten.
Amen.
Right? And then I didn't really want to be a second lieutenant. I mean, I wanted to be a first lieutenant because everyone wants to be the shaved tail. And I got to the 101st, and of course everybody, hey, sure, you want to get a can of beef for the horn? Because I looked relatively young back then. And I'd look at these NCOs, and I thought, and I actually took all my airborne stuff off. So I kind of played the role, right? I wanted to see how these guys would treat me. And they didn't miss it, right? They treated me just like they thought I'd be a college kid. And then one day the old man came down, the colonel, a guy named Jerry Chastain. He's like, where's my snake eater? And everybody's like, how does the colonel know the lieutenant? But he'd already seen my ORB. So then the word got around. Everybody was like, why didn't you tell us? I'm like, it goes back to the golden rule, right? And one thing, and I didn't want to do it, but I tell you what I learned, Will. I never treated lieutenants bad the rest of my life. And I might make a lot of people on this, looking at this kind of angry, but what I've figured out is I think that captains and sergeant majors are wrong in our U.S. Army for the belittling of the lieutenants that they do. Now, I think there's some positive to that because you end up with a strong officer that can come out. but officers sometimes fail. And I didn't understand that until I walked a mile in their shoe, brother. I didn't. So when I was the old lieutenant and I'd had these 22 and 23-year-old guys come up and tell them the E7 and yelled at me in front of everybody, I'm like, well, don't get into it because you're never going to win that. But what you need to do is pull him to the side and ask him what he got out of it. Everybody knows he's the man. It's really interesting that you asked me that because more so than being a warrant officer, I really saw that man, this isn't. We got to get better here, brother. And so I never tolerated it as a captain or a major, unless some guy put himself in the position. If you want to get into it with an E8 and you're a lieutenant, man, you're on your own, brother. But yeah, that was just kind of off the cuff. I never really expected to say that, but it's just something that's kind of stuck to me because I just kind of saw the other side of that, and like these guys are, supposed to be in charge, and there's some that probably maybe haven't really earned it. But I think that also that 03s and E9s particularly, just my personal perspective, probably belittle them a little too much in our culture, in our Army culture. Yeah.
Amen. Amen.
Yeah.
There's an old joke that says the best sayings in the Army is the lieutenant saying, "In my experience," the captain saying, "I've been thinking," the NCO saying, "Trust me, sir," and of course the warrant officer saying, "Back up, watch this shit."
Yeah, I walked all of those, buddy, and I've actually said each one of them.
Amen, right? Amen. Amen. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. So tell me about being a lieutenant. What was your branch? Where did you go? What did you do? Boy. I mean, they didn't make you a maintenance branch guy, did they?
They did, and I mean, I kind of wanted it, and guess where I went?
Where?
The 101st. I didn't want around that heavy stuff, man.
Oh yeah, right.
I wanted to take care of M4s and freaking M240 Bravos that was just replacing the pig back then, right?
Oh,
and of course, I end up with Humvees and Avengers, and we have logistics trucks that as a maintenance guy. But I just kind of thought that was my bread and butter. I think I was 29, getting ready to turn 30, and I had a daughter. My daughter was born in '98, so she was 3. And I wanted to capitalize on some of that time, but those lieutenants would leave at 1400. But unfortunately, Operation Iraqi Freedom, and so I ended up deploying for 2 out of the next 4 years. But I enjoyed my time as a lieutenant. I felt like I was in my comfort zone. I didn't have all that responsibility and authority issue that I kind of explained, which really pressured me pretty heavily, I felt, as a warrant officer. And I had good NCOs, good camaraderie. There was a couple other lieutenants in my battalion, Walter Floyd and Ryan Schwenkhart, prior E7s when they went to OCS. So, we were kind of the stalwarts, and then we had a great Lieutenant Mafia. And I felt like, we kind of bolstered our battalion there in the 101st. And then we went through the transformation, ended up with the 506 Currahees. So best unit I was ever in, not to say anything bad about the other ones, but just really like Colonel Tom Vale, our brigade commander back then. And Colonel Butts down there in the battalion, 2nd Battalion, Red Currahees and White Currahees, and Scott Coy was our battalion commander. And I just really liked it. Went back over to Iraq with them in 05 and 06. So a lot of and then I got to be careful with the brag guys. I know proliferate this. So, but as a 27 engineer guy that was a mechanic with dump trucks, all I did was chase dumps, and I had to work on the dump trucks on weekends and at night. So I'm not a grunt, and it's just like I got to quit chasing jumps so I can do my stuff, and that kind of affect the morale of the mechanics and some of the operators. So I liked it that the whole half-ass full blast, right? So you never kind of finished anything out and brag. But I thought in Campbell you kind of had the best of both worlds. So you had the same kind of airborne soldier mentality, but kind of some of that testosterone was a little bit modulated, and so you could actually get things done. And I ended up liking, never served in the 82nd other than being attached to him. But I really enjoyed the 101st. Loved my time there. Loved the mission. Even the time we was deployed to Iraq. Just a great unit. Dave Petraeus, the guys that replaced him, just a great unit, great mission. And that was kind of babbled on there. But yeah, I really, really enjoyed my time as a lieutenant and a platoon leader, and ended up commanding as a lieutenant. My commander broke his neck, so I ended up commanding. Of course, all my padres called me the lieutenant commander because I was the only lieutenant and they were all captains. But yeah, Had a great
Oh,
time there.
that's great. So you ended up commanding one of those units in the 101st as a
Yeah.
lieutenant.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
It was
That's
good.
awesome. Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah.
really enjoyed it. And so I think yeah, just going through that, uh, and then getting out of the motor pool and getting back around soldiers and rock drills and training and PT, you know, um, not just, parts, issue, troubleshooting services. I liked it. So I got to leave the maintenance arena. I was a maintenance warrant, or maintenance officer, and then a platoon leader. But I also moved up, became the battalion S1 company commander, brigade maintenance officer, brigade support operations officer. So I got to do a lot more. S3 air. Went to I'm not a jump master, so I know I'm surrounded by jump masters. So I brought my Pathfinder certificates and went to Pathfinder school. Back to the whole be all you can be. Just a great unit, great environment, great community there in Clarksville, Tennessee. I mean, probably a lot like Fayetteville, I mean, just to put your arm around the soldier and hug him, just great. Really enjoyed my time. Yeah.
Tell me about meeting your wife. Are you married now?
So I'm divorced. I'm engaged, but my
Okay,
first wife, I think you're probably driving toward my children.
right.
She was from Panama, so I was down there for 3 years. Met her in Panama, going to college with her, right? And we were married in '95, and then we were at Fort Sill. Actually, I think she got pregnant at Bragg. Had Ashley when we were over at Fort Sill, so she's a Reynolds Army Community RACH baby, and that's a whole life changing experience here. You're juggling priorities, right? So you got work, you got the spouse, you got the kids, and then just trying to not understanding, probably understand for the first time in your life how much your mom and dad love you. Once you kind of have this kind of never ending love for this little creature that you've created, that's kind of a blank sheet of paper that you have to teach. Um, and then missed a couple years of her life because of Iraq, and so that was challenging both for me and for her, and I'm sorry for my spouse at the time. But went through life changes people, and contemplating a divorce in '07, and my little man shows up. So there's a picture of him on the video in a tux. He's now taller than me. He's 14 years old, and he's a little bit taller than me. But he was born in 2007, and he's a Clarksville, Tennessee volunteer guy. So he was born there. And then I think that's a wrap for the kids. We got two kids 9 years apart, and everybody always asks me, yeah, they're the same mom and dad. Lots of deployments in there. And then they've been a blessing. One thing too about a parent, you realize that you still love both of them, and you kind of split your love. It just it's like a biblical mana thing. It just keeps coming, right? And seeing them grow up. My daughter now is 23. There was several pictures in your slideshow that you pulled, and I appreciate that. She's doing good and is getting ready to graduate Arizona State with a bachelor's in leadership, organizational leadership. And my son has went into the music world. He plays a trombone and a jazz. What's the saxophone and a clarinet. He's really into all types of music, and he's in ninth grade. So my spouse and I went our separate ways about 3 years ago. And so my kids actually stayed with me. My daughter moved out, but my son stays with me, and then he sees his mom occasionally, who lives in the area here in Fredericksburg, Virginia. But yeah, I kind of rambled off on a tale there. But yeah, it's been a great experience, and especially as I think I've always felt like that, and I feel like you captured it great in the video. But I've never really, that's work and this is play. It's just all been one big party, and so the kids have always been kind of integrated into the Army. Quick story: I got a Joint Service Achievement Medal when I was at Defense Intelligence Agency a couple years ago. I never had that medal, so it's kind of cool. I get to move the rack a little bit, Not really into the rack thing. You just but it's kind of neat. It's a different medal, and I brought it home, and I was like showing my daughter, who was about 20 at the time, and she kind of was like disinterested. I'm like, it's kind of cool. And she's like, Dad, you always have some medal. And I looked at it from her perspective. If she's always been to something, I'm standing up and giving a speech or saying something. So it's just all some other stuff Dad did. It's kind of funny, Will.
Yeah, that highlights a very interesting point, right? We're never heroes to our own children, right? Will Smith wrote a book the other day. I read it. I read Will Smith's book, and he's like, my kids, they don't know me as some international movie star. They just know me as dad,
Yeah.
And so you don't know what you don't know. So, yeah, It's really interesting doing some of these interviews night after night and talking to so many people, trying to understand what the value of these stories are, what the value of our stories are. I know I wish I had my grandfather's story. I wish I could sit down and interview him and pick his brain just one more time. And that's kind of what we're trying to do here, is
Yeah.
pick your brain and get your memories down so that somebody has something to point to and say, "Hey, remember JB said this, right?" And you're
Yeah.
like, "Hey, that was cool." And you can watch it and you can think about it, and we can direct love that way. And you can send messages, to your loved ones in the future. They get to see and hear from you, and we're going to put it all on a thumb drive and put it right there and send you a coin with a serial number on it and a little box and pray that that your relatives fight over it one day, and
Yeah.
and they'll send us a video, and then we'll, after they fight over it and they send us a video, then we'll send them another coin and duplicate it or something and give them one each or something. I don't know, but we really, I appreciate, you being here and talking to me and telling these stories. It's really neat. I can't. So, what kind of unit were you the commander of
It was
as
a
a
maintenance unit,
lieutenant?
right?
Okay.
Yeah. So it was the main support battalion back when we had them. I think we went back to them now. I'm a foreign area officer, so in some ways I'm really kind of disconnected from our army, know more about other armies than my own army. In some ways, I feel, gosh, I shouldn't say that out loud, but yeah, but so yeah, it was just a maintenance support battalion. So we were called the LIMCO, the Light Equipment Maintenance Company. So night vision goggles, weapons, Avengers. We had some Avengers. We did all the levels of maintenance on, to include the division support supply support activities. So that was always, the SSA was a challenging mission of that. But again, great soldiers. It's funny, and I don't want to get on too much of a tangent here, but we're watching this Russian atrocity that's going on in Ukraine right now, and all the loggies like myself, who grew up a loggie, who grew up as a logistics maintenance guy, the quote unquote unsexy piece of the war. General Pagonis moved mountains back in Operation Desert Storm. One of my first cool things, I had a certificate of achievement from him as a private. But that's tough stuff, and the Ruskies don't have it right, and I love it. And, on a tactical level, I'm just hoping that the Ukrainians, can just keep hammering them supply lines, and I hope that those logistics guys are kind of undisciplined and yeah, they can't get the class 3, 5, and 7 down to the doggone maneuver commanders, and it's killing them. And I love it.
We all wish we could move our own little chess pieces on the board and see how we could make the outcome different if we were going to be the tacticians, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Oh
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
So after command and the
Yeah.
next level, where do you go from there?
So I actually, so we come back from Iraq in let's see, in November of '06. It was a really rough year. That was a challenging year. It was right before the surge, just to kind of put that, the insurgency was freaking really on fire. I was down in Baghdad, attached to 4th ID. Our whole 101st 4th Brigade, 506 was down there, and we had a really rough year, man. I mean, I didn't realize, I went to see the movie American Sniper, and I'm watching the end of that movie, and that's my brigade out there, man. That was Walter putting those T-walls out there and walling off Sodar City, and I didn't even know it till I was watching. But we came back, and I needed to get out. I needed to take a break, man. It had been a rough 4 years for me. The marriage was pretty rough, and so the Army sent me up here to Washington D.C., and I ended up in a unit called Army Test and Evaluation Command, up here in Washington D.C. And like, what is this? I didn't even. I'm a little embarrassed to admit this, Will, but I didn't know what a combatant command was at the time. I was a captain, but in my entire life, from private to O3E, I had been at the tactical battalion and below level. To me, the Division G4 was big. I didn't even think about, not only Department of Defense and other services, but Department of Education and Transportation, like the big apparatus of our federal government. So I come up here to Army Test and Evaluation Command. I really learned a lot there. I got into what we now call the total force. You got civilians, you got contractors, you got GSs, and you got military of all flavors. And I right now I haven't worked for an Army officer for about 9 years, all Air Force or GS or SESs. I only have one Army officer that works for me right now. I have a bunch of majors and Navy guys, right? So I'm total a joint force in the last few years. But at the time, I did not know that. So I really had a great time at the Army Test and Evaluation. And what the Army Test and Evaluation Command does is there basically consumer reports for our Army equipment. So when the Army acquisitions, whatever they're going to acquisition, boots, the Army combat helmet. I was the test officer for the Army combat helmet. We take that thing to different labs and blow it up with all kinds of stuff to see how it would do. Would a soldier be? So is it effective? Is it suitable? Is it survival? And we go it through, an evaluation process, and then we'd put it through an operational test down at Fort Hood, whatever it is, be it a tank or be it a robot. I did a robot as well. And I did that for a few years, and I was going to retire. I ended up in my second command. I actually commanded the headquarters of Army Test and Evaluation Command. So I had a 2-star senior rater. My rater was the chief of staff in 06. Still a great, friend of mine. He's been retired a few years. A big Roll Tide, Alabama guy. But General Roger Nadu was my big boss, and he owned more land than anybody in the continental United States, I think, except for Ted Turner or maybe the Rockwell. So if you think about Yuma Test Center, Dugway Testing Ground, we got stuff up in Alaska. Just these huge, massive these test ranges where we drop bombs or whatever we do on them. And that was really interesting. I ended up with, I think, 136 soldiers in 6 different states on my 888 162s. That's what they're called. Yeah, yeah. So I'd try to find these guys for PT tests and urinalysis, and then I'd keep my building straight for the operational safety. OSHA as a commander, and then I was going to hang it up, Will. And so, 20 years. That's a career. It's a wrap. It's been a good ride. Let's see what's next. So I started off to do TAP. Didn't end up that way, but that's what I started doing. Right.
Wow. So you get to 20. You're a captain at the test command.
Yep.
Testing helmets.
Testing helmets and robots. Yes, sir.
Oh, and then so what caused you not to hang your hat up? Somebody come with a job that you couldn't turn down?
So I got a letter in the mail, right? So the Army reached out to me, right? I actually just threw it in the shred bag today. I just found it. November 2009, I had 19 years in 3 months. And I got an email from Branch, a foreign area officer Branch, said, we looked at your records and we want you to apply. We think you're a great candidate to go represent us in a diplomatic environment. I said, well, what is this? And I heard people talk about FAOs before. I don't know what you know about FAOs, but it's just a bunch of guys running around with politicians and drinking booze, right, in foreign countries.
Oh, definitely. I agree. That's got to be it.
Well, I'm domestic, but I'm still drinking the booze and hanging out with cool guys, right? So I threw my name in the hat and got selected. And then I was off to so I hadn't been in the captain career course because I didn't need it because I was this warrant officer guy that knew everything, supposedly, right? So I went to captain career course as a major. And then I went from there to the Defense Language Institute where I learned Spanish. Since then, I picked up some Portuguese. So Latin America, the Combatant Command of SOUTHCOM was my AOR, which is about 24 countries in the Western Hemisphere. So the FAO ride has been really interesting. Working really well above division at the combatant command levels where we have what we call service component commands, Army South, Army North, Air Force South, Navy South, so NAV South. These are things, and those are like force components that actually feed out of the operational force like the 82nd or the 101st or 3rd ID, and you put troops under the Global Employment Force and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff into wherever it's going to be assigned over the course of a year. And that's a little bit complex, this conversation, but it's kind of interesting, right? This is something that a mechanic from Fort Polk would never have been able to understand. It took a long time to grasp that. So I went to DLI for about 8 months to learn Spanish, and then I went down to Peru for what we call the interregional training. So I was stationed at the U.S. Embassy in Peru with about 8 other military of all services to serve on the country team for the U.S. ambassador that's representing our country to the country of Peru. And what you find out in each of these embassies where we have diplomatic relations, you have a security cooperation office, or Office of Security Cooperation, and the attaches, 2 kind of different sets of people, both filled by FAOs, foreign area officers, that represent our armed forces to their armed forces. And kind of geopolitically speaking, what we want is we want that country to pick us as a partner, as opposed to our geopolitical competitors like China and Russia. Fascinating stuff. So in the country of Peru, for example, one of the things I worked with them on is they have T-55 and T-62 Soviet armor. That's who they have for their existential threats, who they deem to be Chile and internal. But the problem is when the Soviet Union fell back in 91, the logistical manufacturing pipeline dried up, and they couldn't get road wheels to replace their T-62, T-55. So we tried to figure out, well, do you have welders? They don't have that MOS. They had to contract that out. So you're dealing with complex issues with a partner nation trying to fix logistical problems, which is kind of my skill set, kind of what I come up with. So just a really interesting world, looking at the world from an outside perspective at how people look at the United States, tearing down stereotypes and unfortunately maybe sometimes creating stereotypes, but just trying to learn how to be a diplomat, hanging out with the Georgetown, Harvard educated kind of guys, the hippies, kind of like, peace and grease, man. Here I am thinking everything's solved through a kinetic, or the stereotype, I would think everything's solved kinetically. That's not true. The foreign area officers really bridged that gap well. But absolutely, I'm so happy I stayed around and did it. Learned so much about the interagency. I learned so much about our fellow man, our fellow military. I learned so much about how great our non-commissioned officer corps is, and by gosh, we could fix a lot of the problems in our partner nation if we would just empower their enlisted guys. And that's not a knock on any particular country. It's just an observation. Anyway, I digress. But yeah, really interesting stuff. Stayed there for a year, came back to the States, and part of that program, one of the reasons I stayed, they were going to send you off to get a graduate degree. So I came back and did the Command General Staff College over at Fort Benning at WINSEC, the Western Institute for Hemisphere International Security Cooperation. A lot of my classmates, I think there were 60 of us in that class, 45 of them were colonels and lieutenant colonels from other nations. So you build these lasting bonds going through U.S. doctrine. And then I did a Troy University master's degree, toughest academic year of my life, 2 master's degrees in 1 year, 1 in Spanish. And then came back up here and went to George Washington, got a 3rd master's degree here at the George Washington Elliott School of International Affairs. And then I'm ready. So then in 2015, I come out of the pipeline. I'm ready to be a FAO and go make policy for the United States of America. Yeah.
Gosh, you need to get you should get to be a dentist by now, man. Come on.
Too bad all that stuff don't equivalent to like a PhD or a medical doctor or something, right?
I mean, come on, dang. I mean, can you at least give an IV, baby?
I can. I got the Eagle First Responder and a Combat Lifesaver training from Fort Polk, Louisiana in 1992, so I can hook you up.
Amen. Yeah. I was proud of my Combat Lifesaver training, baby. Woo-wee.
Will, my first school was at Fort Polk, and it was field sanitation school. Fingers, flies, food, feces. I can't remember the 5th F. Yeah, I was telling my fiance just the other day. Face. Yeah. I come out there, and I thought I'm going to be walking around with the commander making command decisions. And when you go to the field, it's like you set up the porta potty or the latrine and make sure there's soap by the water. Move out. I'm qualified. I'm the commander's advisor, right?
Oh my gosh! It's so look. It is so interesting to look back on the early days of our career and just think about what we thought was happening and where we thought we were. Right? We were like, I'm straightening my little maroon beret, and I'm like, and you're doing the things you're doing about trying to, go to be a drill sergeant and stuff. And, just looking back on it, it's just great times. If you had to go live a year again of your life, where would you go? What year would it be? What would you do? You don't have to start over again, but you just got to live the year again, That's
a great question. Man, I wasn't prepared to answer that. I appreciate it. Let's see. I would have loved to live Fort Campbell, but without all the time downrange, and even that was okay. I loved the 101st. I'm always going to be a Currahee. I'm always going to be a Screaming Eagle. I'm a big King David. That's what we all called our boss, Dave Petraeus. I'm a huge fan. I'm a big fan of Tom Vale. I'm not an infantryman, but I've been beside him my entire life as a pogue. picking up their stuff and making sure their stuff's lit and being on the road with them. So yeah, I guess it probably 2005 or 2006. Yeah.
Amen. Amen. There's something about being in a storied unit, conducting a storied mission that's been previously conducted by storied individuals, and you're carrying on that legacy, right? You're carrying on those times, and it's just your time to carry that pack. That's what you're doing. You're just carrying that pack. So when you can merge your life with the 101st Airborne Division, I think that's a cool thing. I think that's
absolutely.
Yeah.
I have to agree with you. Yeah.
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 If you had to say this piece of equipment is the most hated Army equipment ever that I had to work on, I got a feeling it might be an MLRS, but I'm not sure. What kind of piece of equipment do you not want to work on?
Well, I think that I would have two, right? So I would have the MLRS just because of the complexities of that piece of equipment, and I've shed some tears on that thing. And I was the chief, so that when it come to electrical or hydraulical troubleshooting, thank God for some total force contractors on the battlefield, because I still remember a guy named Tony. I'd be like, Tony from United Defense, man, I can't figure, I can't figure this out. So there's two generators on that thing. And they both pump 440 volts, so 220, 110, but they get 440 volts because that's what it takes to run those servos. They get those hydraulic motors, so that thing will come up and spin. That's an amazing piece of equipment. But when you take GPS, the pad system, position as determined system, lay all that in, and you put that in a tactical vehicle, and you put a kid in there that's 21 years old. Man, they run that thing because they think it's an M1, right? There's some gray hair up in here, and a lot of it come from them kids out there at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, with them MLRSs. Long nights. It's a great piece of equipment. It's on a Bradley frame, but I just think that anytime that you take, Asmus, not Asmus, but what's the name of that piece of equipment? A gyroscope and GPSs, and you take a tactical vehicle in rough terrain, and you mash all that together, and you put live rounds on that thing that'll reach out with the ATACMs, 170 miles, precision fires. There's going to be some bugs in it, and they always seem to come up. But as a mechanic, the M35A2 Charlie Buddy, that was a tough vehicle to work on because most of them were built in the 60s and 70s, and they had been caulk painted a few times. So trying to get that caulk paint off of some of those huge bolts where you'd have to, take a final drive or something off one of them things. I just remember, what we called you put a huge wrench and you put another one, a wrench to get you some more torque on it. And I just remember at Fort Polk, Louisiana, just pouring sweat sometimes for 2 hours trying to get a bolt off and just swearing things, saying things that would have made my mom really furious had she heard me say it.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Do you ever remember being in danger, or maybe helping somebody else that was injured, or running to save somebody from a fire or something?
Yeah. So 2006 was a pretty rough year for the whole Currahee Brigade over there on the east side of Baghdad. The Sunnis and Shias were in almost what was a civil war, and we were kind of stuck in between it. Brian Winsky, who just left command of the 101st, was a battalion commander in my unit, and that was a particularly rough year. People that passing away, Paul Finken and Sergeant Major, our brigade sergeant major got hit with an EFP. IED, explosively formed penetrator, really bad type of IED back in January of 2006, and that was like a month into it, and you just kind of know it's going to be a long year. And there was a young guy in 3rd ID that we did the replacement in place and transfer of authority, so we're replacing the brigade that's there, and they were a heavy brigade out of the Rock of the Marne out at 3rd ID, and on Christmas Day 2005, they hit an EFP and they couldn't get the turret around. So the soldier, passed away inside the M1. Couldn't get the fire trucks to get the water. Couldn't get it out. So he had a pretty bad way to go, and just that always kind of hurts. Even if he's not one of your guys, but a fellow soldier, knowing if he's driving an M1, he's probably just a kid. And then knowing that Baghdad's, I think, 7 hours ahead of the United States, someone's getting a knock on Christmas Day from some dude who's supposed to be home in a couple weeks on the Riptoa. And on the way out, it was the same way Colonel Paul Finken and Colonel McDonough, we were ripped home with 4th ID, and 2 of our 05s got killed in the same Humvee, and Sergeant Gage was driving it. And, yeah, just bad times, man.
It's at some point, we signed a check when we raised our hand and did the things that we did, that we knew that we were going to give our life in the defense of our country if necessary. And it's tough watching that happen around us sometimes and wondering, why it wasn't us and why it had to be somebody else. And sometimes you think it would be easier almost if it was us. Is there a message you would give to those patriots today that are thinking about making a sacrifice for their country? Would you say, looking back on your time as you're bringing it to a close, have you found satisfaction in your chosen profession in the military?
Oh, I have absolutely found satisfaction. I really appreciate you having me. This has actually went so much better, at least from my perspective, just kind of running down memory lane. You asked me a lot of questions that kind of provoked some unexpected responses, just things I hadn't thought about for years. I had a boss at 101st who was another guy who knew Phil Weaver from the boys back there at Bragg behind the gate. His name is Matt Ferguson, who is a loggy as well, but a really good guy. And he retired a few years ago as a colonel. But he said something I never forgot. He said, the military, and particularly the Army, and I say that because I don't understand all the cultures of the other branches like I do my own. You never have to grow up, right? We're all kids. You're in high school you're in the marching band, whatever it is that you did in the high school, football guy, me, you never have to grow up, man. You're with great guys. You're doing a good mission. You're having a good time. You're doing stuff like jumping out of airplanes while in flight. You're doping on a rope or doing some spy stuff off a UH-60. Or hell, when I was with Dick Bowman in Panama, he would fly nap of the earth, and that guy, was a Little Bird 160th guy that best pilot I ever flew with is that guy. He would fly that plane, that Black Hawk so fast, I had tears just from the wind streaming out of my eyes, and the tires were just spinning, flying off the top of that triple canopy, man. You don't get that in corporate America, and arguably probably in any other walk of life. And not only those experiences, the people that you do it with. There is a consequence when what we say in the Army and the military, when the balloon goes up. And, I've been blessed and lucky. I've got all my digits, most of my health. I feel absolutely grateful. And to what you said, perhaps maybe sometimes a little guilty. But this country, besides all of our internal domestic squabbles and internal domestic political problems, is an amazing place that our ancestors fought for in imperfect ways over 200 and some years ago. And it's absolutely worth defending, even in its imperfections. And there's no better place to do that than with people from all walks of life and the cultures that you learned, people from Louisiana, the people from Fort Campbell in Tennessee and Clarksville and Fayetteville and in Oklahoma. There's great people that you just get a chance to learn, and you learn while you're with other people doing great things. It's not perfect, but it's pretty damn close. And so if you want to do something with your life and do something that's bigger than you and do it with a group of people that are from all other walks of life that you'll learn beside and learn from, and go to other places in our country and try whatever it is that they're eating out in Oklahoma or Tennessee or Fort Bragg or Monterey, California. There's no place better to do it than in the military. And why, I would never rally the flag around a coffin. That is a piece of it. And there's a way that we have to honor those who go, our military, funerals and honor system. And I'm not saying that's not something there, but it's just so much more than what you see in the movies. And I would have never met you, Will, without this kind of a shared experience that you and I have had. Even if we didn't know each other at all, we just fell right into this kind of a long conversation about our shared experiences. And so I don't think you can get that in many other walks of life.
Amen. Amen. There is a shared experience of the American military, just the phrase "at ease," that is just amazing. It just crosses all boundaries. Everybody understands. It's a neat thing. We're here telling stories. I'm here with Colonel J.B. Bissell. Thank you, sir, for being with me. I really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed it. Is there something that maybe we've left out that you haven't told us about that you think that maybe would be a good story, or maybe even something you want to leave us with? But eventually I would love it if you'd call your unit to attention and give a hand salute and sign out, at some point. Not necessarily right now, but I was just wondering, how would you leave it? How would you sign off? What would it be like?
Oh man, I'm kind of contemplating that right now because I'm wrapping my career up. I'm looking at the next step. Can I grow a beard? Kind of looking forward to that. Wait, everybody joking. I got some hair left, so maybe I can get a little ponytail going there. Not gonna walk too far on the wild side of it. I'm just kidding around a little bit. I just think that they're. I think that I talk to different people through my walk of life about the intrinsic value of service to others, and it don't have to be in the military, bro. It can be in the Peace Corps. It can actually be just going to an assisted care facility and sitting down and listening to people and talking to someone who don't have time. I personally do some volunteering with the youth. I have a lot of inspiration seeing the excitement that young people bring. And not necessarily just military related. I do a little bit with GROTC, but just take time. If I'm 50 years old, and I think back, you was talking about wish you could spend time with your grandma and grandpa. I became more like of a history guy, and I wish I could have talked about the Great Depression to my grandma and grandpa more. They lived through it. They didn't trust banks. I understand why they didn't, but I didn't back then. But I think you can learn a lot by just having a little bit of service to others. You can just carve a little bit of that time out. And I think if you do that, you learn a little bit about this emotional intelligence, you learn a bit about other people. You develop an empathy for other. Empathy is the most important word, not only of leaders, but followers and just people. Try to understand the other person's perspective and try to, put a little bit more into life than what you try to pull out, and it'll make the world a little bit better place. Yeah, that's pretty much all the advice I'd have for anybody.
I love it, sir. Well, Hey, let's look at the video we made. J.B. Bissell, everybody, Lieutenant Colonel. Here we go. So you're really about to get married, sir?
With you,
down the road here in a little bit. Not real soon, but just got engaged last year. Yeah, I got a great woman. She's by my side. She's my rock. And she keeps me between the white lines, man, which is a challenging endeavor.
Like a leaf falling from a tree. If I be a shooting star, you make a wish. No, I don't fake this kind of feeling. Never felt so real. My heart is on the table, 'cause you're my everything. I do. I wanna marry you. 'Cause when you're around, I know it's true. The way you make me feel is so good, baby. So good, so good. Every single day we spend apart, I wanna be with you. Baby, take my hand, hold it tight just like you do. feels so good, so good. When I wake up in the morning and I see your face, I'm becoming blind by your dazzling grace. What a beautiful feeling to be close to you. There's nothing else I wanna do. Ooh, and from the fields of flowers you chose to pick me. You're spreading sugar on my misery, and I don't fake this kind of feeling, never felt so real. My heart is on the table 'cause you're my everything. I do, I wanna marry you. 'Cause when you're around I know it's true. The way you make me feel is so good, baby. So good, so good. Every single day was spent apart, I wanna be with you. Baby, take my hand, hold it tight just like you do. Feels so good, so good. And I do, I wanna marry you. 'Cause when you're around I know it's true. The way you make me feel is so good, baby. So good, so good. Every single day was spent apart, I wanna be with you. Baby, take my hand, hold it tight just like you do. Feels so good, so good.
Sir, it has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. I really, really appreciate it. Lieutenant Colonel J.B. Bissell, everybody. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate what you're doing, and this has been absolutely amazing. I really appreciate it, Will. Thank you so much, and God bless you and what you're doing here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe, and I appreciate it. Please support it, formerforce.com. We'll see y'all.